Welcome to the Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host. I'm Pastor Chris. Thank you very much for joining me today. The Shepherd Podcast is a way to introduce you to people at Shepherd of the Hills, at our church, school, and childcare. A lot of great people. Everybody has a story to tell. And I think today you're really going to enjoy getting to know a member of our church, Deb Woods. Deb has been retired for a couple years from the field of education. She has been a part of our church since about 2014. And she's very involved in many ways. She's one of the people in the Evangelist training program. We're going to talk about that, as well as her faith journey. God has led Deb on an interesting journey through some different churches, and all of that has shaped who she is. And so I bet there'll be some points of connection with your own life as we're talking perhaps your own journey. Now I'd like to welcome to the podcast Deb Woods. Deb, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Glad to have you. So in the introduction, I just said briefly you were retired from the field of education. Can you tell a little bit more about what you did before your retirement?
Yes, I taught for 10 years at Christian schools, one in Massachusetts. And then when I moved to West Virginia, there were a couple schools there. I always taught 7th and 8th grade math and science.
Okay.
And I really liked teaching in the Christian school because we were allowed to teach Christianly. And a lot of people wonder about science and math and Christianity, but there's just a lot of connections and correlations. I always taught one class of English grammar, and I remember one young man that said, "Mrs. Woods, you're the only teacher I know that can bring God into grammar." So God even exists in grammar.
How do you bring God into grammar?
We were talking about refining of gold. And I don't remember how it came up, but they wanted to know how it happened, and it must have been a story we were reading, and so I explained it to them, that you heat it up until it gets real hot, and then they take the dross off, and once the smith or the goldsmith can see his face in the gold, he knows it's refined. And I said, that's what God does with us. He turns up the heat in us, and once he sees himself, he knows he's getting there. And so it was a way to bring it into their English lesson.
Okay, that's great. And then most recently from San Antonio?
I was in I left there and went into higher education and worked in several capacities. When I retired from West Virginia, I moved down here. I had been on my own for several years, away from family. My family's in California, most of them. Okay. They were. A lot of them are here in Texas now. Yeah. But I wanted to get closer to family. My sister Diane was the only one that lived here at the time. Yeah. And I would come down and visit her, and I really liked San Antonio. So I decided to move down here. Couldn't really afford to be retired, so I got a job as an academic advisor at St. Philip's College in their science and technology department, and worked with college kids, which I absolutely love too. Yeah. I like working with students. Yeah. I consider myself an encourager. It wasn't easy for me to get through college, so I know what they were going through, and so I felt like I was able to give them that inspiration that they needed to keep going, even when they didn't feel like it.
Absolutely.
So I retired from there and have been just enjoying life since.
Yeah. How do you spend your time in retirement?
The first year I spent it sleeping mostly.
Recovering.
Catching up, believe it or not. Yeah. And then COVID hit. I had always looked forward to retirement because I wanted to get more involved at the church, but with work and whatnot, and especially because it was quite a drive away to go there. Just wasn't able to. But once COVID lifted, I came back. They had the Welcome Home team. I got involved with that. And it's just kind of snowballed from there, and just try to fill in wherever they need me. I go to Saturday night, and that's more of the livelier, and just, it's just a lot more open and fun, so.
Yeah, you're definitely a regular on Saturday night. I've seen you a little bit on Sundays too. You tend to, like you said, you like to serve where needed.
Well, I've been trying to learn what both Mickey and Tex do because they work so much. Yeah. And I said, let me learn some of this, and then we can kind of trade off, and you're not always having to be here.
Sure.
Not that they've minded, and they never complained. I don't mean that at all. But I know what it is to be committed to something for Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. You get tired. And I'm sure you wouldn't know anything about that. But, it was just a way for me to start learning that. Plus, I'm starting to learn a lot of the Sunday people that sometimes show up on Saturday night, and they're starting to get to know some of the more lively, radical Saturday nighters. And we have a good time. It's worked out really well.
Yeah. Now I want to talk about your faith journey and how that has shaped you. You grew up in the Lutheran Church?
Yes, I did. The Missouri Synod Lutheran.
Okay.
I don't ever remember a time we weren't in church. There were 6 of us.
That's right.
Parents named us all D's: Diane, Debbie, Donna, Dennis, Denise, Dana. Why, don't ask me. Made it fun when my mom had to call us, but nevertheless, we went to the Lutheran schools, which the church we belonged to. I was born in Illinois, but my dad's company transferred him to the Bay Area in California when I was about 6.
Okay.
And we went to a small Lutheran church there, and they had a small day school, 3 classrooms and 2 grades in each classroom, so it was very small. But for me, it was an ideal way because I loved learning, and the classes were small, and it was just an enjoyable thing. I would highly recommend it for anyone. I did find out when I went off to the public schools, I was kind of ahead because, they have good academics at the Lutheran schools.
Oh, sure.
Then we moved down to Southern California to Orange in Orange County and started attending St. John's Lutheran, which is where Micah is now.
Yeah, it's a big church.
And that's where I was when I moved to, Rhode Island in 1982, I think.
From Southern California to Rhode Island.
Yes,
that's a difference.
Yes. In fact, I wasn't sure I wanted to go there because the town I was going to was smaller than Orange County, and I thought, oh my good, well, the state's smaller than Orange County, so it was one of those things like, really? But I loved it. I did have a good time. It was a good experience. I have to admit, I don't like New England maybe as well as other parts of the country. They do tend to be kind of reserved, and I am probably not at all a reserved person. I think I woke them up a little too. But it was an advantage as a teacher. Okay. Because to them, I was a nutty, flaky Californian. And so they kind of, I was able to really capture the minds and the interest of the students. And like I said, they're middle school kids. We just had fun. Basically, we had fun. I was like a big kid, and we all had fun together.
I can see that about you. You like to have fun. Yeah. And
then I moved to West Virginia, which I call it my second home. I absolutely love West Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
And I taught there also. But after about 10 years of teaching, I just felt like it was time to move on, and an opportunity opened up in a university, so I went there and I did some admissions work, I did some advising work, I helped establish the disabilities program and their career center, things like that. Ended up finally, before I moved here, in a community college, being their director of community education. So, it's been a real broad background of education. I get bored easily. So it was kind of nice, And so when I moved down here and found out they had the openings for the academic advisors, I thought, oh, this is perfect. Right. And in fact, I was one of the first ones. It was a whole new way that the Alamo colleges had of doing their advising. And I was one of the first ones that they hired. So I was in on the ground floor. And just enjoyed it. I was ready, though, to retire.
Yeah. But now, as your career was moving along that path, your faith journey moved along a path, too. There was a time when you left the Lutheran Church and you were experiencing other kinds of Christian groups. So, as one part of your life was going in a direction, another part was going in another direction. Right. So can you tell us about that journey and the different kinds of churches that you were a part of?
When I hit, and this is probably true of a lot of kids in any kind of church, when I hit high school, I was disillusioned, I guess that's the right word, in what I saw in the church, in our Lutheran church. And it wasn't that they weren't good people, I don't mean that, but, and I hope people don't take this wrong, but a lot of Lutherans are, and Deb is not a person. I'm happy, I'm up, and I used to think, inform your faith, we're singing about God here and Jesus, and, and so I became disillusioned because I didn't see it real for people.
Okay.
To me, God was real, Jesus was real, but I didn't see it in the people I would go to church with every Sunday.
Okay.
And so I left the church to go find, well, I call it looking for truth with a capital T.
Okay.
Because I knew it existed.
Okay.
Went back to college, and it's true, and I was in the UC system, the University of California, and it's probably was at the beginning, right at the end of the 60s, early 70s, before we got into everything now, but it was kind of one of those things where they were starting to become more liberal. And I didn't consider myself a real conservative person, but I definitely didn't consider myself a real liberal person either.
Okay.
So I just mainly went in search of truth and began to seek in a lot of different Eastern religions and philosophies. And they had a certain amount of truth, but everything that they required was something I had to do to reach their God or their nirvana or their higher whatever. And I couldn't do it. I mean, I could never be good enough or whatever. And finally, in 1979, after I'd graduated and come back to Southern California, I was sitting in my mom's home praying because I was crying out to God. I said, I know there has to be something there. I took a lot of sciences in college. I was pre-med. Just don't give me sick people, which is why I didn't pursue medicine. But I loved learning how things worked. And I would sit in class and just be amazed. How could you think this is by chance or accident? There's got to be something out there greater than us that did all of this. Uh-huh. And I just remember crying out to God, and he brought to my memory a memory verse from when I was in second grade at Good Shepherd Lutheran School, because we always had to memorize Ephesians 2, 8, and 9.
Sure.
For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. And I broke, and it was like the Lord said, Deborah, you've never had to earn it. You just have to receive it. And that just blew my mind. I didn't know that it could be that easy. And so then I began meeting people. At the time, it was a non-denominational church. I don't know if you've ever heard of Chuck Smith or John Wimber. They were very affiliated with the Calvary Chapel and the Vineyard, and I began attending their churches, and it was real for them. The people that I would go to, it was real for them, and that's what I wanted, But by the same token, when I came back here, and I was in those churches for years and got very involved and had good teaching. One thing I can say is I always measured wherever I attended against the theology of the Lutheran Church, because we have good theology here. Not every denomination does, but so I always measured it by that. So I knew I was getting good teaching. But when I moved here with Diane, or to live with Diane, my sister Diane, I wanted to go to church. I said, let's try and find a non-denominational one, because Diane hadn't been to church for a while. And she would go to a few of them with me, but I could tell she just was not comfortable with it like I was. So I finally said, okay, let's try a Lutheran church. And the very first day we came to try this, on a Saturday, you guys were all celebrating Pastor Dan's retirement.
Oh, really? That was your first?
Yeah, that was our first time. So nobody
was
here.
Service.
No, that's what I mean. We got here, we're going, wait a minute.
Of all weekends.
But we didn't, I know, we didn't get discouraged. We came back, And I should probably back up a bit with my sister Diane on my faith journey. When I was getting involved with all that Eastern religion and mysticism, I was very involved with transcendental meditation. Which, being a Californian, all that wacko stuff. But She got me a book called Transcendental Hesitation, and she prayed for 7 years for me because she knew that it was not right.
Wow.
It wasn't good. And they will give you what they call your mantra, and you can't tell anyone, and it's no one else's. She gave me the book, and I found my mantra in there, and that was it. I never went back. I never practiced it again because they had lied to me. You do not lie to me. I'm looking for truth. Give me truth, but don't lie. And so that's when I began to search for God and Jesus of my childhood. And when I came back, it was like he said, yes, I am the God you knew as a girl. I'm like, oh, I thought so, And but we came here. We did come back the next week, and we both just knew. I mean, it's like many people have said, we just knew this was home. Wow. We knew this is where the Lord had for us.
Wow.
We have been so happy here. Just, I don't know, it's just been a great experience. People have made us feel very loved and accepted.
Great.
And, so it's been a wonderful experience. It really has. I cannot complain. I'm glad that we came. But I did not become a member right away because, remember, I had left the church, and they kind of, I don't think they really excommunicated me, but when I didn't ever come back, they never came to find out why. Oh. That bothered me. Yeah. So when people don't come, which we probably do, but I'm just saying, it just made me feel weird, And so I'm not generally a joiner, but I figured I'm supporting it with my tithes and offerings, with my service, and I come regularly. To me, that made me a member. But God really began to work on my heart about making a commitment, because he says, part of it is a commitment to a body of believers. And when I heard about the evangelism class, I think I came to you. First, I thought anybody could sign up for it, and then I found out the class was closed, and I'm like, what do you mean it's closed? I just read about it. That many people signed up already? But I asked, and you said, yes, but go and check with the teacher, see what she says. So I did. I called Laura, who's a sweetheart, and her first reaction was, no, I've already told someone else they couldn't join, and I can't let you. And I was heartbroken, but I didn't give up. Yeah. I didn't get off the phone.
Yeah, we were told we could only have 2 people per church.
Right.
And we ended up with 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm glad. But it is interesting because she said something that really held a lot of credibility with me, because I'm a big prayer and intercessor. And she said, because she could tell I was being pretty persistent and I wanted to join. She said, let me call my prayer partner, which she did. And I'm praying the whole time, Lord, please let her prayer partner say yes. And whatever. And she called back and she said, yes, you can join. Okay. And I am so glad. It has been just a real eye-opener. It's, not only have I become reconnected to my childhood church, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod that I had left on a fairly bad note, but I was back under a better note, made a commitment, and then was able to join this class. And I took a couple of classes, I think, before I even was able to take the new member class. And I remember walking in and you were surprised. It's like, what are you doing here?
I thought you were just coming to learn the material. I didn't know you were
I thought of telling you I was a secret shopper or something. We're just here checking it out. Yeah. But and that's kind of been the reaction of a lot of people when they found out, especially when you announced it at church. They're like, what? We thought you were a member.
Yeah.
Well, but I haven't regretted it. And the evangelism class, like I said, it's really gotten me reconnected with the catechism, the things I learned in confirmation, 40, 50 years ago that, goes in one ear and out the other until you do your confirmation, and then you don't ever think about it again. But it's been wonderful, being able to, I have a greater appreciation for Martin Luther. Not that he was a perfect man, because there are things I disagree with him on as far as some of his held beliefs when it comes to Jewish people, whatever. But He was a pretty smart guy.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that he would write this catechism out that would explain things and answer questions, and I'm thinking, where was this in high school when I really needed it? Junior high, not so much, but in high school. I mean, I probably still had the book, but didn't think of going there. But anyway, so, here I am, at Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church. It just feels like home. It feels right. It feels like home. You preached on Sunday about, when you asked the man why he came, and he said, I felt led. Well, that's how I felt. I felt led. When I was persistent about the evangelism class, I didn't know what it was about. When I was in high school, they gave us ambassadors for Christ in the Lutheran Church and sent us out 2 by 2, but gave us no training. We went out, scared to death people were going to slam their door in our face, which they did, many of them. Yeah. So I didn't have a good taste for evangelism, but this was just a whole new way of looking at it in a very non-threatening, easy way, which is kind of how I am. I mean, I know what brought me back to God, and it was people just allowing me to express how I felt and then telling me why they felt the way they did. They didn't judge me. They didn't say, well, that's stupid. They just, well, that's interesting, Let me tell you about this, and,
Can you tell us, what are you learning in the Evangelist class?
Oh, my goodness.
Or what have been some things that have really stood out to you as being helpful?
I think yesterday's lesson, many of us were talking about that afterwards. It was on the means of grace.
Okay.
And it was my turn to do a devotional. And I thought I had picked the one on prayer because, that's a real heart desire. And then when I realized what I had picked, I was like, oh no. But it really forced me to learn more about what does that mean, means of grace, the Word of God, baptism, communion. Because I was, especially coming from kind of the non-denominational background, oh no, you have to know what you're doing, But Laura has been so good at being able to explain why babies can be baptized,
What has she said?
Basically, because we're born in original sin.
Okay.
And that's one way to, what's the word I'm looking for? To ignite, I guess, in a sense, the Holy Spirit within that child.
Sure, that's a good word.
And then I remember at the class that I went with you, and you talked about how baptism kind of starts it, and then communion or confirmation kind of builds on it or seals it. I don't know if seal is the right word, but, makes it really stick.
Sure.
And then the whole thing with communion, I had forgotten that Lutherans taught it was the body and blood of Christ.
Okay.
And I went through a real thing with that, but having to prepare for this devotional and get into things and remembering an experience I had on, I call it Resurrection Sunday. I don't call it Easter. But I wasn't able to come to church because I just had my knee surgery done. And I was at home, and Diane and I had a devotional on Maundy Thursday. And Paul is talking in Corinthians there about we did it to remember his death. And that, I thought, what? I thought it was to remember his resurrection, And kind of what the Lord ministered to me was, how can I get to the empty tomb if I haven't gone through the cross and understood what that cost you for me? It's all wonderful. We're going to rise one day and be in heaven. But what did it really cost you? And that really struck me. And the idea that I was taking, or I do take within him, or within me, his very presence. And it has changed my whole way of experiencing communion.
Really?
Every Saturday, yes. I'm so glad we do it every Saturday. And so, I had people in my life, like I say, if my sister hadn't prayed for me for 7 years, but she did. Granted, she stopped going to church, but God didn't forget her, and she got back involved, and, between the two of us, it kept it going, and so.
So can I go back to the Evangelist class? You talked about the means of grace, baptism, communion. How does it relate to evangelism? Do they make that connection about how do we use this teaching to reach out with the gospel to people who may not know Christ?
I think so, because a lot of people, whether they are churched or not, have heard of communion. Mm-hmm. They've heard of baptism. Mm-hmm. I don't know that they always have heard of grace, but I think, at least for me, the way I would use it or have used it, especially grace, that unmerited favor. Mm-hmm. We cannot earn it. It's a free gift. All we can do is receive it and be grateful for it. Mm-hmm. And so I know a lot of people do have questions. They think they have to earn something, and when you're able to begin to explain to them, no, you don't. Or, there's a process we can go through whereby we confess our sin and we can be cleansed of that. Mm-hmm. The baptism thing, I have to admit, Pastor, I believe it and everything, but I'm still kind of taking in, because it's a whole new concept for me, because I always felt that you had to be at an age of accountability. Well, the Bible doesn't say what that is. Who knows what it is, But I'm trying to think of some of the other lessons we've had. There's been a lot of things, like I say,
You've talked about creation. You've talked about the work of Jesus, right? You've been walking through the parts of the creed.
Yes.
The parts of the catechism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And each of those has made a connection to evangelism.
Well,
creation. I mean, somehow you tie that into evangelism.
Exactly. Well, we had to write a thing. We had to rewrite, what was it? I can't remember. We could only do it in one page. Uh-huh. How we would explain the creation story, and how that, the whole idea that it started in the garden, that they made this decision. Mm-hmm. We had free will. They made the decision to not choose what God wanted. Mm-hmm. And rather than God throw them out and start all over, he made a way. I used to tell my students, God is a way cool God, because first of all, he creates man, gives him a free will. He creates us knowing we're going to fall away. But then he loves us enough to give us a way back to him. Mm. And that grabs a lot of people, because they suddenly realize, I'm not lost out there. There are answers. Mm. And so, I mean, yeah.
What would you say to someone who's in the boat that you are in, looking for truth with a capital T? People who are looking for something substantive, something that they can rely on in life. If someone's in that position right now, I'm just looking for some truth in this world.
Right.
What would you say to them?
Well, I talked with a gentleman this week that's how his faith walk was. However, it led him into Jehovah's Witnesses. Oh. And I haven't had an opportunity to talk only that one time, but I told him that I was in search of the same thing, and I took a whole different path. And I said, some point, but that's what the evangelism class teaches you, is to let them tell their story. Pick up on things, not necessarily suddenly try to bring them to a decision with the Roman road or, the 4 gospel laws, but to allow them to tell their story. And to hear what they're saying. So and then to use certain questions like, gee, have you ever wondered about this? Or I was just thinking when you said that, have you thought about this? And it helps them kind of discover their own truth in the Lord. Yeah. And I've been praying for this gentleman. I'm hoping for opportunities to be able to talk with him, because I think that's what I have liked about this class, is you don't have to go out there scared of what to say. You don't even necessarily have to say anything per se the first time you meet someone. It really is listening to them and letting them tell you their story. Sure. And then keying in on certain things. Okay. So it starts with their story as opposed to some sort of preconceived speech that you have. But just, and that requires some flexibility, some willingness to go with wherever they're taking the conversation and somehow bring in the gospel, which means the gospel can relate to everybody's story in some way. And most people are seeking very similar things.
Yeah.
And like I said, sometimes they go in different directions.
Yeah.
And
well, I'm glad you're a part of that class, and I'm looking forward to all the good things that are going to come out of you being a part of it, as well as the rest of the group.
yeah, I am too. It's a good group of people. It really is. We've all gotten very close and very encouraging and supportive of one another.
Yeah.
It's just, and you learn so much bouncing things off from each other, you know.
Oh, sure.
We all have different experiences, and so maybe the way they handle one thing you hadn't thought of, and I can use that, you know. And
Absolutely.
But it's been a good class. It's been I recommend anybody that can take it to take it. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It is intense, which is why I'm glad I'm retired. I don't know how the people do it that have to work.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really don't. But they manage to, you know, and boy, it's probably one of the best things I've ever studied. And I love to read. I love to study. I take a lot of Hillsdale College classes and different things. And it's just been, you know, like Melody was sharing earlier, a very practical way of doing evangelism, you know. So
I'm glad you're a part of it. I'm glad that training is being
Yes.
provided to people in our church. And
I am too.
And I want to thank you for this conversation today.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I was able to come in. I was very nervous,
Yeah?
but it went much better than I thought.
I certainly enjoyed it,
Okay, good.
and I know our audience is going to enjoy it as well.
I hope so.
Yes. And thank you so much for being our audience. Thanks for watching and listening, getting to know Deb better today, and hopefully you found some points of connection in your own story, some encouragement for your own life. Please continue to join us on the Shepherd Podcast as we continue to introduce you to people at Shepherd that I think you'd like to get to know better. And until then, the Lord's blessings to you today. May He keep you healthy and safe and strong. The peace of the Lord be with you today.